Okay, time now for a legal face-off. Joining us now in a moment will be two top lawyers, but the big questions to them. Will the Supreme Court be able to ensure justice? Will courts succeed where the executive has clearly failed? SIT under Supreme Court supervision, the only way out now? Joining us now on our legal face-off, Dushyant Dave, senior advocate, and C. Aryama Sundaram, another senior advocate of the Supreme Court. Appreciate both of you joining us. To you, Mr. Dave, first. Do you believe that the court can provide justice where the executive has failed? It's now 3 months since this horrific gang rape took place almost. Do you believe that it is too little, too late now for the court to intervene? Can they ensure that we actually get justice for the victims with a court-monitored probe? Is that the only way out?
As you rightly said, it is too late, too little. Court itself has been in session of this case for almost now 1.5 months, and the court has done precious little. The court accepted, the statements of the Solicitor General on behalf of Government of India and Government of Manipur on face value, and declined to really actively, intervene. I think one must realize one thing, that this is a case where there is a very, very serious issue of complete breakdown of law and order. The constitutional mechanism in the state has failed. The center has been just looking the other way about it. The Home Minister, who's supposedly so powerful, spent 4 days in Manipur and didn't know about this case about these women. I mean, it is inconceivable that he was not aware of it. So the Government of India apparently actively hid the facts from the nation for whatever reasons. And the facts, unfortunately for them, truth always has an uncanny way of surfacing. It surfaced. Now, when it surfaced, the Supreme Court certainly galvanizes itself and seeks to take suo motu cognizance. But I feel that this is a grossest violations of human rights against the minority community, because there is no doubt that besides the fact that large number of people have died, many cases of rapes have taken place. Over 600 churches, I believe, have been burned down. Schools have been burned down belonging to the Kuki community. So I think, it was something where court should have stepped in and provided a healing touch much earlier by appointing independent, strong observers like retired, respected Chief Justice like Chief Justice Lodha or Justice Thakur or somebody, and a whole, group of experts, police and bureaucratic experts, to really go there, find out what the truth was.
Right.
Because one thing is very clear, that the government did not want truth to come out of Manipur.
Okay,
and that is, I think, the government has done great disservice to the nation, but the Supreme Court, I don't think, has lived up to the expectations out of them.
Okay, so you're saying too little, too late. Just a factual check. As per official records, about 230 churches and over about 20 temples have, at various levels, small and big, been attacked when the violence took place in Manipur. But Aryama Sundaram, the question before the court is, how far can the court go in taking over the role of executive? Law and order is for the state to handle. It's for the police and perhaps now for the CBI. But many of the lawyers arguing in court said, we have no faith in the CBI. They want a court-monitored SIT probe with retired DGPs. Do you believe that this lack of faith in the executive is telling in the times we live? Or is the court, perhaps by conducting a probe, essentially going to send a message that they have no faith in the executive?
Rajdeep, let's understand this is a very delicate situation. And I'm saying delicate because while I agree with my good friend Dushyant that this is absolutely heinous, what has happened is very extreme, I also have to temper myself with reminding myself that after all, we are a democracy as a country, and the basis of a democracy is what we call the separation of powers, where one wing of the state does not interfere with another wing of the state in the normal course of things. This is definitely a matter for the executive to take care of. It's definitely a law and order situation. Even worse, it's getting to a public order situation. This is something the executive has obviously failed to handle in the way they should have. And the separation of powers dictates a certain cautious approach by the courts before stepping into what is the executive's sphere of
No,
responsibility.
but when the executive fails,
Now, when does
what
the court
happens
come
when
in?
should the
But
court
in
step
India,
in when the executive fails?
exactly. I'm answering you. Yes, that's the point I'm making. Under the Indian Constitution, unlike constitutions of many other countries, the Indian Supreme Court has enormous powers to step in into issues such as this when circumstances warrant it. And definitely the court has found the circumstances warrant it. Dushyant says too little, too late. But my point is that a cautious approach of when to step in by the court is definitely required in a democracy and where there's separation of powers. That the court has to step in when the executive absolutely fails in its functions, affecting human rights of citizens. The court has to step in.
Sir, but
So I
140,
do
with due
believe
regard,
that there's
140
never the
people
correct
have,
time.
sir, when
Some people
140
will feel
people
it's
have
too
died,
late,
more than
others
1,000.
will feel it's too
Sure,
soon.
but when 140 people have died, thousands have been displaced, there is an element of ethnic divide of a kind that is rarely seen. Cookies in one part, Meteis in one part. I mean, all of that is deeply troubling. So are you saying that the court should not have a court-monitored probe of these incidents?
That's why I think a time has come when the court will seriously have to consider having a court-monitored probe. But this is an issue which is partly political, greatly social, hugely legal. It involves all. Now, the executive fails, the court steps in when human rights are involved. This is not a policy matter where courts don't step in. Human rights get involved, court does step in. Unless the executive can satisfy the court that it is going to earnestly and will capably deal with the situation, I believe the court will have to step in, like they had to step in very often in the past, and put up sits and special investigation teams to deal with the matter.
But,
and if you ask me, has the time now come for the court to come into it? Yes, the time has now come. And like I said, there's never a right time.
Okay.
Some will say it's too early, some will say it's too late. It's always a situation when you have a separation of powers.
Okay.
But at this juncture, so let's talk of the present and the future, immediate future. What's to be done? I think the court has taken session of it. And I'm slightly more optimistic than Dushyant when I say that I do believe that something is going to turn around now.
Can I ask you, Mr. Dave, there will be those, and this was argued by one of the lawyers in court, saying court must look at also what's happening in West Bengal. Courts must also look at, instances of rape that take place in other states. Now, you could even turn the clock back to other instances of mass violence. Forget, what's happened in Manipur. Look at what happened over the years. How far can the court go? This whataboutery. The Chief Justice made it very clear, you cannot compare one instance with the other. But do you believe that because this is politically so fraught, therefore the court willy-nilly will get caught in a political argument now? The BJP will say, why don't you go into Bengal?
Well, let me say one thing very clearly. Nobody can condone violence of any kind in any state. And I have no doubt that the law and order machinery is taking care of the situation in the states that they are complaining about. But it's now become a fashion on the part of the Bharatiya Janata Party that as and when it fails to really help the people who need their help and allows this violence to perpetrate, and there is no doubt in my mind that the violence in Manipur has taken place not just because the government failed, but because the government of Manipur wanted to fail. Let's be very clear about it. I mean, here is a prime minister who has not said a word about Manipur violence while he sheds tears for his cheetahs and tigers, from time to time. It's really sad to see the prime minister keeping this kind of a silence on an issue which is really very, very serious, because here is a group of minorities, the Christians, who are being targeted.
No, Meteis have also, let me correct you, sir. Meteis have also suffered. Both communities have suffered. My point is, when you make a statement like that.
Don't interrupt, Rajdeep.
Okay.
I am also aware that Meiteis have suffered. But there is no doubt that the Christians have suffered much more. And it is now a pattern in this country that the minorities are suffering much more. Yes, in the process, some majority community people will suffer. But minorities are being targeted across the states. And therefore, it is the duty of the Supreme Court my good friend Mr. Aryama Sundaram in one hand says that police failed, executive failed, but Supreme Court should not step in. Then again he says time has come, Supreme Court should step in. I feel Supreme Court should have stepped in the day it was moved, because government of Manipur and central government were looking the other way.
But is it
They
a
were not
political
there to
minefield?
protect.
Dushyant, the way if the court steps in, are they stepping into a political minefield?
No, not at all. Court is a custodian of the fundamental rights. Right to life is most important of the valued and cherished human rights under the Constitution. And if that right is being violated in such a systematic manner, we have seen Rajdeep this happening in 1984 in Delhi and other places. We have seen it happen in Gujarat in 2002. We are seeing this again in Manipur. I mean, it is every time court has failed. In 84, it didn't step in. In 2002, it stepped in too late. And now again in Manipur, it is stepping in with, very cautious approach. I don't understand why caution. People have died. People are being raped. Their properties are destroyed. Communities are divided. Court should have put the healing touch much earlier by bringing in best people to really stop the violence. You have to take action against the police. Suspend them, all the officers. Suspend the bureaucrats who are responsible. And pass strictures against the state government.
So you don't see that, you don't see that as court taking over executive powers. If court starts suspending police officers, is that taking over executive powers?
Not at all. I will give you a classic example. When Allahabad High Court was attacked by the some policemen way back, and police was not able to protect the judges and lawyers, Chief Justice Venkat Chalaya issued directions that army should enter Allahabad High Court and protect, and CRPF should enter, and others, and they entered within a matter of 2 hours. So when it comes to them, the judges are very, very clear that yes, we must use powers to stop violence. When it comes to innocent citizens, the judges are extremely slow and thinking for months together as to what is to be done. I must say that I am deeply disappointed in Chief Justice Chandrachud and his colleagues. I think they have failed miserably. They failed the nation.
So you don't go by the strong observation that Justice Chandrachud has made both a couple of weeks ago and today. You say that's not enough. You say observations are not enough. You need action on the ground. The truth, of course, is that it required some of those observations for the government now to say they will pull the cases out of Manipur. They are ready to take even the gang rape case out of Manipur. Do you believe that in a way also Aryama Sundaram is possibly a solution? These cases cannot be prosecuted in Manipur. Some are suggesting they've got to be taken out to ensure fairness. What does that say about our system?
No, I don't think it's a simple case of fairness. Their point is these cases are incendiary. They are really flaring up. When the case goes on, there are going to be more and more emotions coming up. It's already a sensitive situation. Taking the case out is not casting any kind of aspersion on the justice delivery system in Manipur. It is to see to it that this whole thing and the case going on doesn't flare up tensions which are already there. It is a wise thing to do. Certainly a wise thing to do in the given circumstances from that angle.
But do you think it's too late? But do you think that we will actually be able to prosecute effectively? We've seen in the past, in cases involving mass violence, the courts have often not been able to prosecute. I'll give you an example of Mumbai 92, where over 1,000 people died. Barely two dozen people eventually were convicted. Is it too late? Should there be another? Is there another way?
Despite Justice Sri Krishna's report.
Justice Sri Krishna's report was thrown into the Arabian Sea sadly when the government changed. Yes, Mr. Sundaram.
The fact is, Rajdeep, when on the one hand you're saying is it too late? I'm sorry, but I have to re-emphasize one aspect. Whether we like it or not, when you live in a democracy which goes strongly by separation of powers, there is a tendency that one could interfere into the realm of the others. If the legislature or the executive was to step into the judiciary's shoes, I know that people would be screaming and saying, how can the legislative or the executive step into the judiciary's shoes? The judiciary has to, whether you like it or not, by the system of separation of powers, allow the state to do its function. This judiciary should come in only when there's no other option. Now,
maybe that stage has been reached in Manipur.
Dave, feels the judiciary should come in earlier. The fact is the judiciary cannot be a Don Quixote and in every matter come in as and when. Then you have an equal risk of it becoming a judicial dictatorship, which it cannot be. So the point is, it is a very difficult thing to time. I may agree with you that here the judiciary has stepped in a bit too late. Not too late to do anything, but bit later than what they should have.
Okay.
But it's always a very, very difficult decision to take as to when to step in.
Okay,
and when to step into an area which it is really the executive function to do. What the judiciary tries to do then is to nudge, to push, to shove the executive to do its functions and do it fairly. And that is what you mean by court monitored.
Okay. One final word from you, Mr. Dave. Judicial dictatorship is one view that critics will have, but there will be others who will say that, look, when the executive is failing, when parliament cannot debate Manipur, when the prime minister remains silent on it, when the chief minister is accused of partisanship, the only way out is the court. Should we have more faith in the court than perhaps you have at the moment?
Look, I'll tell you a classic example. The 1992 judgment in, second judge's case. The Supreme Court, grabbed the power from the government to appoint judges in High Courts and Supreme Court, rewriting the Constitution. So it's not that Supreme Court doesn't take away the powers from the executive from time to time. They did it for good reason. Whether it has been successful or failure, that's a separate issue.
Right.
I feel under separation of power theory, if any one of the organs of the state fails to perform the constitutional duties imposed upon it, because who protects the right to life? It's the executive. If the executive has failed to protect the lives of the citizens, then certainly some via media has to be found. Some solution has to be found.
A Supreme Court monitored probe. Supreme Court
Absolutely.
monitored probe in a fixed time, with a fixed time frame, with officers who are seen as credible is the way forward. Am I correct?
And headed by a retired Chief Justice like Chief Justice Lodha or Justice Thakur, who are impeccable.
Okay.
Something like that. Otherwise, it's all mockery. What's happening? I mean, people are dying. What are you going to do? How will you give them 5 lakhs and 10 lakhs and forget about them? I mean, do you realize people who have lost their near and dear ones? What must be happening through their mind? Do you realize what will happen to the children of these women who have been publicly paraded and raped? And you are now confining the case to 5 people. The whole crowd was there. You should prosecute the entire crowd. I mean, what is happening to this country? Civility is dead. Humanity is dead. That people see this and don't even intervene to stop. I mean, we must learn something. We must bring humanity back into us, civility back into us. We must become a cultural nation.
So
we have become completely uncultured.
Okay, let me leave it there. Those are very strong words. Hopefully someone is listening. Remember, the court will continue with its hearings tomorrow and hopefully be passing an order on this case. Manipur remains our top focus. Aryama Sundaram, Dushyant Dave, always great to have two articulate lawyers joining us on our face-off here.